All right. Hi, I'm Alicia Mars. I'm the coordinator for the California Fish Passage Forum, and we want to thank you for joining us today. We're really excited. This is the first webinar of this kind that we're hosting as part of a comprehensive effort that the forum is supporting with our partners to help update the Passage Assessment Database, or the PAD. So we're going to get into those details as we move through the morning here. So I'm not going to steal Anne and Neil's thunder, but I want them to turn their cameras on briefly and introduce themselves before we get any further.
Hello, good morning. I'm Ann Elston. I manage the Passage Assessment Database. I work for Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission, and I've been managing the PAD for almost 10 years. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne.
Good morning. My name is Neil Shiraga. I'm a data management specialist for the Passage Assessment Database, and I started just 4 months ago. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you all for joining.
Great. Thanks to both of you. So you saw we turned our cameras on. We're going to turn them off for most of the webinar, but we want to invite you to turn yours on if you would like. We have a decent sized group, but I think it'd be great to do some quick introductions. So I'm going to call your name. We're going to go alphabetically by who I can see on here. And so if you would like to turn your camera on, you're welcome to, but if you could just state your name, and I apologize now if I mispronounce names, the organization you're with, and your position. And if you want to, you can mention any familiarity you have with Region 4. So this is California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Region 4. Okay, so first up is Andy Shriver.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. Andy Shriver here, salmon ecologist, fluvial geomorphologist in Region 4 CDFW for the San Joaquin River Restoration Program, and I focus on spawning incubation and fish passage, etc. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks so much. Asia Jones.
Hi, my name is Asia Jones. I'm a master's student at UC Davis and an intern at Water Audit California. And I also used to work at River Partners, which did a lot of work in this area.
Fantastic. And I apologize if we end up going out of alphabetical order. We're going to do our best, but as people join on, it gets a little wiggly here. So Brian Beal.
Good morning. Brian Beal, Senior S Supervisor. I mostly work on inland waters right now, but I have worked on a lot of the anadromous waters in the region.
Great, thank you. Carolyn, I'm going to screw this up. Garrity, maybe? Maybe she's having issues unmuting, so we'll go next to.
Sorry.
Sorry.
This is Carolyn Garrity with the Monterey National Estuary Program, and I'm the Restoration Program Manager.
Sorry for the butcher of your name. Okay, Casey Horgan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Casey. I am an environmental scientist with California Fish and Wildlife. But prior to this position, I would say over the last year or so, I spent a lot of time out in Region 4 doing fish passage assessments on Caltrans roadway crossing structures. So I've been out there a lot.
Awesome, thank you. Dane St. George.
All right, hi there. Hi, I'm Dane St. George. I work with Casey in our Santa Barbara office for CDFW, and we do steelhead monitoring primarily in Region 5, but occasionally we get to visit some of the southern Region 4 streams like the Santa Maria River watershed.
Great,
Thanks.
Thank you. Don Baldwin.
Hi, I'm Don Baldwin with California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Region 4 in San Luis Obispo, implementing steelhead habitat and passage assessments or population assessments here on the San Luis Obispo coast.
Great. Okay, so Freddie Ott.
Good morning, everybody. Freddie Oddie, City of San Luis Obispo. I'm the city's biologist. Work here in San Luis Obispo Creek. In a former life as a consultant, worked in several of the watersheds adjacent, Santa Rosa Creek, Choro Creek, Los Osos Creek, all the way down to Rio Grande and beyond. Working with Don Baldwin quite a bit on steelhead passage and restoration as well. Happy Tuesday.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm sorry about the last name. Jenna Lasco.
Hi, I'm Jenna Lasco. I'm with California State Parks Natural Resources Division, and I'm the Aquatic Resources Specialist.
Great, thanks, Jenna. Jeff Steinhardt.
Hi, I'm Jeff Steinhardt. I am a habitat restoration coordinator for the Fish and Wildlife Service in Lodi, and I work mainly on the Calaveras, Casumnas, and the Tuolumne rivers.
Great, thanks. Steve Sau.
Hi, this is Steve Sau. I am working for California Department of Fish and Wildlife, LaGrange office. My office encompasses Stanislaus, Merced, and Tuolumne River, and part of the San Joaquin.
Great, thank you. Heather Swinney.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Heather Swinney. I'm out of the regional office for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out of Sacramento, and I'm the coordinator for the San Joaquin River Restoration Program.
Great,
morning.
thanks, Heather. JD Weichert.
Morning, everybody. JD Weichert here, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Habitat Restoration Coordinator out of our Lodi office. I work predominantly on the Stanislaus, Tuolumne, and Merced rivers.
Great, thanks. Jay Abel.
I'm Jay Abel. I work for a water agency in Santa Clara County, and our sort of jurisdictional extent drops into the very northern edge of Region 4, and then I have a longstanding interest in fish passage throughout our county.
Great, thank you. Jennifer Nelson.
Good morning, I'm Jennifer Nelson. I'm an environmental scientist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I have been conducting habitat and steelhead population assessments in the streams along the Central Coast for about 30 years now.
Great, thank you. Jimmy Wolf.
It blinked out for a minute. So my name is Jim Wolf. I am a senior biologist with Caltrans out of headquarters in Sacramento. I have worked extensively with Casey over the last assessments he mentioned.
You were a little hard to hear there, but I think I'll just relay a little bit that you're a biologist for Caltrans out of headquarters. So hopefully we can fix your audio later if you want to chime in more. So thanks for joining us. So Julia Clickard.
Hello, I'm Julia Clickard. I'm a new scientific aide for Fish and Wildlife, and I'm working in the SLO County area.
Great, thank you. Justin Aluka. Sorry, I'm sure I.
That's all right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Justin Olick. I'm an environmental scientist with CDFW on the San Joaquin River Restoration Program.
Great, thanks so much. Chrissy Atkinson.
Hello, I'm Chrissy Atkinson. I am the CDFW supervisor on the Central Coast, San Luis Obispo, Monterey, and San Benito County.
Great, thanks, Chrissy. Megan Quinn.
Hi, I'm Megan Quinn. I am the Associate Director of California River Restoration and Dam Removal at American Rivers.
Great, thanks. Rich Moravich. You may be working out. And if you're having issues with your audio, I know, looks like Valerie Stefan already, she introduced herself in the chat. So that's a great option too, if you can't unmute yourself for any reason. I'm gonna move down to Stephen Johnson here.
I'm Stephen Johnson. I work for the nonprofit Creeklands Conservation based out of Arroyo Grande, and we've been doing a lot of habitat restoration and burial removal projects in San Luis Obispo County.
Great, thanks so much. Tim Fromm.
Hi, good morning. Tim Fromm. I work for Trout Unlimited, basically on the Central Coast. I live down in Carmel Valley, do quite a bit of work on the Carmel River, Big Sur River, wander all the way up San Mateo Coast, some work in Santa Clara County, those streams that run to the ocean.
Great.
Salinas and the Arroyo Seco also.
Awesome. A wealth of knowledge. Tommy Williams.
Hello. Hello, I'm Tommy Williams, Southwest Fisheries Science Center for NIMS out of Santa Cruz.
Great, thanks for joining us. Towns Burgess.
Yeah, good morning, Towns Burgess. I'm the lead fish biologist for the San Joaquin River Restoration Program, working for the Bureau of Reclamation. And obviously we are working on several passage projects, starting at Friant Dam there in the picture, all the way down to the confluence with the Merced and the San Joaquin. Good to be here.
Great, thank you. Valerie, do you have audio now? I'll give you an opportunity. Nope, okay. I'll read your chat. Folks couldn't see it in the chat, but Valerie Steffen looks like she's a paralegal and researcher at the Water Audit California, master's in environmental science, and worked on various environmental matters in Idaho, Oregon, and California. So thank you so much for joining us. Is there anyone that came on that after I may have passed them that would like to, that can introduce themselves? So I'll just let you unmute yourselves on your own here.
Hi, this is Rich Marovich with Water Audit California. I retired from Solano County Water Agency last year after 21 years as the first streamkeeper of Kudu Creek. And now I'm working on restoring habitat in the Napa River watershed.
Great, thanks so much for joining us.
My name is William McKinnon. I'm general counsel for Water Audit California. We're advocates for the public trust, and we tend to enforce matters that the CDFW considers to be offensive. We are not an agency of government. We are a private entity, but we are closely aligned with the objectives of CDFW, but not quite as constrained in the way we act as they may be.
Great, thanks for joining us.
I'm Suzanne DeLeon. I'm a senior environmental scientist out of the Monterey office, and I implement and manage FRGP and Prop 1 watershed restoration grants for the entire region.
Fantastic. All right.
I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm with CDFW, also with the San Joaquin River Restoration Program. Thanks for having us.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, hello, my name is Mike Grill. I'm an environmental scientist with CDFW also. I work on the San Joaquin River Restoration Program, studying adult migration and over summer holding.
Fantastic. Anyone else that we've missed? We've got a great group here. No? Okay, so I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be working on or going through today. Hopefully not too much work for all of you. So we just did our introductions, and then I'm going to give you a quick overview of the California Fish Passage Forum if you're not already familiar. And then we're going to dive into the meat of our agenda today, which is this effort we're calling the PAD plan. So this was sparked through a desire from a variety of member organizations, including PSMFC, CDFW of the forum, and others, to help update some of the records in the PAD plan outside of the Caltrans records. So this is really a comprehensive effort that we began in 2021, and I'm gonna let Anne cover more of that later. But we're really excited that you're here joining us today, because the local knowledge of local experts is really, really imperative to this effort to make sure that we're getting the best information possible. And we recognize that this is a moving target. It's never, ever going to be perfect, but we want to do what we can together collaboratively to help update the records in the PAD. So because it's such a useful tool for such a variety of resources and activities. So after we go through a brief introduction to the PAD, because we're guessing most of you are pretty familiar, and then the PAD plan effort for Region 4, we're going to open it up to questions on that, and then we're going to have a roundtable discussion or some time at the end for you all, if you would like, to bring up issues related to fish passage in this region. So this could be projects that are pending, projects underway or nearing completion. These are things that wouldn't necessarily be captured in the review of records that's part of the PAD plan, and you'll learn more about that in a little bit. But we've heard from partners in other regions that they wanted this opportunity to kind of have a informal forum to chat. So if we have a little bit of time, we're going to test this out at the end. So I just wanted to plant the seed now, so if you can start thinking about it as we go through, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat as we're going through. We'll stop periodically for questions. But otherwise, I think we're about ready to get started, unless Ann and Neil, do you have anything you want to add before we jump in?
No, Alicia, I think you covered everything.
Take it away.
Great. All right, I'm going to stop my video here and we'll jump in. So real quick, so the California Fish Passage Forum, and so we're kind of hosting this webinar. We are an association of public, private, and nonprofit agencies all working together with the shared mission of protecting and revitalizing anadromous fish populations in California. So we look to do this through a variety of ways, but really the key to the forum is collaboration. So we're looking for opportunities to collaborate among these partners, but also partners outside of the official membership of the forum. Because we see this obviously as a broad effort that many organizations, both state, federal, local, what have you, nonprofits, tribes, are working on throughout the state of California. We're just a group of organizations we're trying to work together to identify ways that we can help. So the forum currently is made up of 10 signatories. So you see the organizations here on the screen. And really, as I mentioned, our strength comes from this coalition of collaboration. So together, we have a variety of state agencies, so CDFW, California Department of Water Resources, California State Coastal Commission, California State Parks, as well as federal agency partners, NOAA Fisheries, Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission, more of a regional focus, and then some nonprofit partners, Trout Unlimited and CalTrout. We're always open to new members wanting to join the forum, so that's something you're more than welcome to reach out to me about. I'd love to chat about what that means, but really we're excited to have this network of folks that can really provide both technical expertise, but also help us identify ways that we can leverage our resources and knowledge, again, with the shared vision and mission of achieving enhanced or better fish passage across the waters of California. So another aspect of the forum is that we are part of a national network of what we call regional fish habitat partnerships, or FHPs, that are under the umbrella of the National Fish Habitat Partnership, so otherwise known as NFHAP. So there's 20 other fish habitat partnerships, or I'm sorry, there's 19 others, so 20 total, including the forum. And we're all working together with maybe a different flavor or different focus under the shared mission, again, of enhancing fish habitat across the country. So some of the other fish habitat partnerships that are working in California that you may or may not already be aware of are here on the screen. So we've got the Pacific Marine and Estuarine Partnership, Western Native Trout Initiative, Pacific Lamprey Conservation Initiative, which I also coordinate, Desert Fish Habitat Partnership, and the Reservoir Fisheries Habitat Partnership. So you can see that each of these, sorry, that slide took a mind of its own. Each of these organizations may have a species focus, a geographic focus, or focused on a certain type of water body like reservoirs, but they all are we work together to leverage our individualized focus and expertise together to and hopefully enhance fish habitat conservation across the country. So each of these groups also has RFPs that go out each year and other opportunities for collaboration. So if you'd like to learn more about any of them, please just feel free to reach out to me. You can Google them as well if you'd like, but I'd be happy to connect you up with their coordinators as well. So an example of leveraging this network of partners and FHPs, those Fish Habitat Partnership, is an effort that the forum just completed in partnership with PMEP and PLCI to explore the science and data of barriers to tidal connectivity. So you may have participated in this or heard about it through other channels, but essentially we worked together with some funding from NIFHEP to host a virtual symposium and workshop where we brought together partners from across these 3 FHPs. We pulled together data with help from Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission to create an ArcGIS data catalog of various GIS data layers describing the locations of tidal connectivity structures. We developed a report summarizing this, and then there was a comprehensive lit review focused on barriers to tidal connectivity for resident and anadromous lamprey species. And this was something that came out of that workshop and symposium as an identified data gap. And so hopefully moving forward, the PLCI Lamprey Technical Work Group has created a new subgroup based on with this focus of investigating barriers to tidal connectivity further. Which is also open to new members. So back to the forum, in addition to contributing to our partner networks and leveraging those resources, we also utilize the in-house expertise and other funding sources to support science and research and tools that can help, again, hopefully further our mission of enhancing anadromous fish habitat and reducing barriers to fish passage in California. So these are just a few of the things, and the one that's not on here is the PAD, and we're going to get very deep into the PAD, but the forum has a long history of helping support and stand up the PAD, but I don't want to steal Anne's thunder, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But some of these other aspects are really great examples of how we've been able to utilize the knowledge in-house to provide resources that our partners can use. So up here in the corner here, we've got a photo from a project that the forum helps support that was executed by NOAA or NIMS, National Marine Fisheries Service. So this was a juvenile fish passage criteria assessment, and it ended up helping inform the updates that NIMS, the Southwest region, made in 2019, their 2019 addendum to guidelines for salmonid passage at stream crossings. So it was a really great example of funded research after an identified problem that then was able to help be a component for helping to inform some of the updates in those guidelines. So another example is an effort that we did in honor of World Fish Migration Day, which was developing a story map here on preparing the Klamath Basin for dam removal. So this was focusing on efforts by our partners and others throughout the region to eliminate or enhance fish passage as we prepare for the removal of the 4 Klamath River dams. So please feel free to poke around. We've got that on our website still. It's a really cool tool. And then finally, 2 more things that are more data-driven and related to the PAD. One of our partners, Brett Holycross at PSMFC, has developed what's called a baseline fish habitat layer. It's a GIS layer that's helping to identify quality fish habitat across the state. And so that is a tool that we've seen utilized by partners within the forum and outside. It helps inform fish pass. It's really innovative. There's some projects that we've funded recently that are testing and utilizing it as well. And we're really excited to see where that goes. And then additionally, fish pass. So you may have heard we have a optimization model to help identify barriers, fish passage barriers for removal. It is available on the web for folks to poke around and play with. And it includes in the data inputs, the baseline fish habitat layer, as well as PAD and other inputs to help users prioritize barriers in very specific watersheds if you would like, or what have you, for potential removal. So any of these, please feel free to reach out to us. Be happy to give you more information. And that's just a snapshot. There's many other resources that we've helped assist with. So finally, just wanted to give a quick plug here for, we do as the forum have a tiny, relatively tiny pot of funding available to support projects that can enhance fish passage. So this could be a barrier removal, this could be design, assessments. We can fund outreach and a variety of different aspects. Traditionally, this has been something that we can provide to projects that may need a little bit of a bump to get over the finish line. The funding can be fairly flexible. We do have a new requirement after recent legislation at the federal level for one-to-one non-federal match, but in California, there's such a wide variety of state resources available that doesn't tend to be a huge obstacle, but we encourage you to reach out and stay tuned. Our next RFP will be released later this year for FY24 funding. I know that sounds crazy, but it is true. And then we just want to keep shining a light on some of the other partner funding sources. There's so much. We're so fortunate in California to have so many different resources. There's no way I could have them all on the screen here, but we do want to just highlight there's some unprecedented levels of funding available from the federal government as a result of the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. Those will keep coming over the next year and beyond. So we're really excited to hopefully provide, the forum is looking for ways that we can help support that. Maybe some of that funding will end up going through the forum, but really we want to be able to be, because we have so many federal partners participating in the forum, finding ways that we can help make linkages and leverage that to best enhance fish passage in the state. So if you have questions about that or any of those funding resources, please don't hesitate to reach out. And so that's all I've got on the forum. But I'd welcome a few questions, and Neil is going to set up some slides for him and Anne to jump into the PAD plan here.
Well, good morning. As Neil's getting the slides together, so I'll be giving an overview. This is Ann Elston. I'll be giving an overview of the PAD as well as the PAD plan, and then Neil will be talking about specifics in Region 4. Okay. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So, little overview of the PAD. It's was compiled about 2 decades ago. It is a inventory of fish passage assessments across the state of California. 2 decades ago, it was largely focused on coastal barriers, and it has since been expanded into inland areas as well as above Iron Gate into Klamath and into Oregon above Iron Gate. So it is publicly available, and we actively engage in the fish passage community that includes sending newsletters when the PAD is updated in bios and other information such as this webinar. We also ask for input and updates to the PAD. Sometimes that's individual, sending it out to individual contacts, or also to larger fish passage community. Since this expansion, we've into the inland and further into the state, we have over 26,000 records. And one thing to note is we rely heavily on input from others, 100% of that, and we have over 100 contributors of data. Okay. So the assessments across California have varied in scope. Single assessments anywhere, like single location, good example is this picture. This road crossing would be an example of that. To watershed scale assessments and by ownership, such as Caltrans crossings or Mendocino County crossings. Protocols also vary in from anywhere from less rigorous professional judgment to more rigorous hydraulic modeling like fish crossing and HECRAS. And in between, we have rapid assessment protocols and the green, gray, red filter. So the rapid assessment protocols are those that are assessments that are done quickly in the field and either determine not a barrier or a potential barrier, and those potentials get further evaluated in these green, gray, red filters. An example of that is CDFW's restoration manual, also Caltrans detailed protocol. The filters are identical, and then you have U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services AOP. And they have their green, gray, red filters. So those green sites are determined not to be barriers. Those red appear to be complete. And then those gray sites, those are the ones that need further evaluation through fish crossing primarily. Fish crossing evaluates, passage at certain flows to species and life stage, certain species and life stages. And it's primarily used for road crossings. However, I have seen it used in dams and dam-like structures and grade control structures. And then you have HECRAS, which is primarily used, again, to evaluate passage of certain flows, primarily for dams and grade control structures. Thank you. So the pad contains both anthropogenic and natural barriers. So you have some examples of photos here, which is a waterfall, that's a natural barrier referred to as non-structural in the pad. You also have a concrete channel, a dam, and a crossing. These are just a few examples of anthropogenic barriers. We also have potential barriers. So those are locations that need further evaluation to determine barrier status. They might be a known barrier, a total, partial, or temporal. Barriers are closed as temporal, or no, not a barrier really. So they do need evaluation. And then we have those locations that have been assessed as non-barriers, so they don't have passage constraint. And then we also include remediations, and we track that in the pad, anywhere from a retrofit to full removal. And in addition, diversions along the way were added to the pad and include both screened and unscreened diversions. Primarily, they're focused or largely in the Central Valley, at least in the pad, primarily because that's where the assessment effort focused on and was then fed into the pad. Thank you. Okay. So critical information. The pad contains lots of information, but this is the most critical barrier status as the type of site and structure. Oh, thank you, Neil. I was going to get to that, but you're welcome to play the video while I talk. So type of site structure, as I showed on the previous slide, I provided some examples. The protocol, we do track that as well. You can query that or look at that. And the species and life stages that are being blocked. We have quite a bit of information that could always use more by each that is blocked at each barrier. And then we have location information, GPS units or GPS coordinates, excuse me, and ownership information, both land and structure. And then treatment information, like I said, we track remediation. So we have the treatment status, whether it's planned or in design phase or in completed, and there are some places where we have completed needs monitoring, and then we also have recommendation for treatment, those locations that haven't been treated, and once completed, we also identify the year it was completed. So habitat quality and quantity, if available, we have a little bit of this. It would be lovely to have more. There's been some assessments done on habitat quality here and there. And that's always very useful, especially when prioritizing barriers for removal. And then photos. Photos are really important. Clearly, like this photo, you can see the before photo of the Highway 197 culvert in Salton Creek. It helps you see, the photos help you see the passage constraint in many ways. You can see that it's a barrier. Some photos are great to also have upstream and downstream, so you can see habitat, or what the quality sort of is, or what it looks like in the area and the vicinity. And then so as I said, we track treatment, and this is an example. So I have that before photo and then the after photo. So culverts were replaced in 2015 with a full span bridge, courtesy of, by Caltrans. And this video is courtesy of Melinda Molnar of Caltrans. It shows an adult salmon swimming upstream. I guess it's not really past the culvert, but where the culvert was. So post remediation after it was replaced by a bridge. And I should note that this wasn't a complete barrier prior to remediation. Thank you. So this is a graph of all the records in the pad except for Caltrans locations, and it's by their barrier status. So I wanted to show how there's quite a bit of complete barriers, or those identified as complete barriers in the pad, and quite a bit of unscreened diversions also identified in the pad. And then really focus on these unknown and unassessed sites. Those are what I was referring to as potential barriers. They may also not be barriers, but those are ones that need further evaluation. So accessing the pad, the central location for accessing data is the pad program page on CalFish. You can get to several different tools through the data access tab. One is the pad data portal, which is hosted by, thank you. It was hosted by California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So it's on their website, but again, you can link from this pad program page. And it's updated the day after changes or updates are made in the pad. You can download it as a CSV and bring it into Excel. You can query it first if you want. This one is being queried by Humboldt County or by watershed or by stream or anything like that. It has these little world icons, which you can link back to bios, individual links. In some cases, you can get assessment reports. Those are little page icons on the far left. So then less frequently, the pad layer on bios is updated, and you can go straight to bios to get pad, but if you go through the pad program page, you'll just get a preloaded pad layer in bios, so you don't have to add it and you don't have to select it. And that is updated, as I said, less frequently, but it was recently updated a couple of weeks ago. And then lastly, you can see pad in Google Earth. It's available as a Google Earth file, and it's updated at the same time the pad layer and bios. Okay. So there, as I mentioned, the pad has been around for 2 decades, at least compiled 2 decades, but some of the data actually goes back even further. You know, probably a lot is older and out of date, and some of it is older stream files, stream survey files. Some of the information was by river mile and had you know, it was a hand-drawn on maps in many cases, and that information got fed into the pad. And so some locations were off, and so we've discovered duplicates along the way. So most of the a lot of efforts have been ad hoc. So as either user of the pad or myself have noticed issues, we've made updates. So when I view data and I see some discrepancy or some issues, I'll make a change or even reach out to a local expert as needed. So along we found duplicates and deleted those, and location changes and barrier status updates, as well as other attribute updates such as site names, ownership information, stream name, interpreter 2 name, and then we have done some, broader cleanup efforts. Sharon Power is actually on this call today with Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission. She was fantastic and compared the assessments in the PAD within Del Norte County to records in the PAD. Specifically, we were looking for where the barrier statuses may have not matched the assessments. So I had noticed prior to this that in a few cases, at least, the barrier status in the assessment, like a Ross Taylor assessment, wasn't matching in the PAD, the barrier status in the PAD. And so she did all of the review and updated it. It's fantastic, but there's probably still a little bit more new barriers or remediation since then. And then we've also filled in a lot of blank fields. This is just some of them county watershed fields, also protocol. There were some missing protocol fields. I don't think we have any missing barrier statuses. This is not a complete list, but this is what I could remember off the top of my head and from doing some data gathering. Okay. So besides our own internal cleanup efforts, Caltrans has done a lot on their end and their records. They started, doing assessments back in 2002. Really, Humboldt State University assessed a lot of the northern coastal crossings or north coast crossings for them, and they've done assessments all the way up to today. And now they're really focused on, everything else that needs assessment on the California highway system, on anadromous waters in the rest of the state of California. So they've also did a little QA/QC. I worked with a consultant of theirs, came up with a statement of work, and basically for reviewing locations, much like we are doing on non-Caltrans locations using GIS primarily, and Neil will talk a little bit about that. But basically, they were looking at, maybe the location was off. We went to match it. Was it really supposed to be on this road crossing? Things like that, and a lot of locations were updated as well. So then, Caltrans, both Sharon and myself helped with the gap analysis. So we identified all of those assessments that were needed on the California highway system, taking into account the ones that had already been completed in the PAD. And those were further, so I will say though, Sharon did the bulk of the work, and those were further prioritized by fish passage advisory committees. They are made up of several different partners and agencies and organizations partnering with Caltrans to update science and data for Caltrans and help with their prioritization process. And so after the fish packs prioritized, all of the assessments on the California highway system, all of the California highway system crossings will be assessed per Senate Bill 857, those on anadromous waters, but as a requirement of that Senate bill. However, the fish packs are really helpful in prioritizing what should be done first, based on, in need for the species. So then from what came out of that is more assessments, going south to north, primarily. A lot of Southern California assessments were done. A lot of them were also completed by Casey Horgan, who's on the call, as he mentioned, and 3Cs and lots of others. And then they've worked a lot, they've completed a lot in Central Valley too. It's been a massive effort and it's really ramped up since the prioritization by the fish packs and since the gap analysis. So in addition to all the assessments and QA/QC that Caltrans has done, they also established a lot of these fish packs. I mean, a couple were established early on in 2003, but the past few years they've established, or I guess several years, they've established even more. Again, to provide more science and data to primarily for their crossings, which ties back into the pad. So that includes, you know, updates to any barrier statuses as needed, other useful information, a lot of habitat assessment information, photos, and then I said it's primarily been focused on Caltrans, but the fish pack members have discovered barriers upstream and downstream of Caltrans crossings that have fed and been provided to the pad. And I think that's generally it. Okay, thank you. As I mentioned, you know, the pad has done some cleanup, primarily ad hoc, some here and there, more broader, and Caltrans has been really ramping up and doing their assessments and cleanup effort. And but we needed a comprehensive strategy to really review and update the rest of the records outside of Caltrans. And it was really started with Dan Allen, my supervisor at Pacific States, who came to me and asked me to create a plan that we both got input from him, Pacific States, and Tom Schroyer at the time, CDFW, who was the aquatic connectivity coordinator. Back then it was fish passage coordinator for the state for CDFW. And then we provided it after compiling and getting input from them. We provided it to the Forum Science and Data Committee for more input, and they flushed it out more and really added to it, made it a plan that was easier to follow step by step. But it is, I have to say, is dynamic in nature, so it's meant to change as needed. And I'll get into that more as I talk about lessons learned later on. So prior to implementation, we really had to update the PAD standard methodology. We combined those, they were separate documents, we combined them. The standards had been updated or compiled back in 2013, and then updated in 2014, and maybe some updates along the way, but really not updated until more recently into 2021. We might have started the process in 2020, reviewing it. But generally the most recent updates have been really clarity on certain things, and especially what information is needed for updating records in the pads. For example, fish passage improvement project information that is then fed into the pads or remediations, and also new location records. And we were trying to update it as much as possible because we plan on through this process, as we update records, bring all the updated records and the new information and new records up into to the new data standards. So the implementation was a two-step process. It's desktop review first, so some QA/QC and generally using GIS and as much as we can as PAD administrators and data management specialists, and then going to the local experts and to review after we've done as much cleanup as we can on our own. So the experts, our definition of fish passage expert is someone who has knowledge of fish passage in their, so whether it's professional or some education or training, and as well as some expertise or knowledge of local watersheds. Okay. So this was our general desktop review process. We started with reviewing the other unknown site types for known barriers. So these were ones that didn't quite fit into a category, or they hadn't been categorized into it like a dam or road crossing, but they were known barriers listed as either a complete barrier or some sort of partial barrier. And so we needed more information, especially those unknowns. We didn't know, what is it, a grade control structure or what? So we did a lot of data gathering, and local experts and were really integral in this too. But so there weren't too many records, about 125, and we did update a bulk of them. I'm hoping through the whole entire process we'll update even more. I will say this process started by Alex Jones with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He went through and queried all of them and tried to determine what the site types were. And so we recategorized a lot of the site types, but in some cases, we also updated barrier statuses too, as information was provided by local experts and as we were doing the data gathering. So then the next step was to identify and delete duplicates. So what we did was we looked at records within 500 feet of each other to identify potential duplicates. When I first did this, there were a little over 3,000. 2/3 were diversions, and I went through about 17% of them. So it was a lot of work. And so we decided to transition to do it more region by region. So basically complete it before we move on to the expert review. So we've completed it for Region 5 as well as Region 4 as we are moving into the expert review for that region. Can you go back? I haven't got. And then I'm in the middle section. And then stream name and downstream names. Those were done very similarly in that we are doing that, region by region. We completed that. First, actually, we filled in all the nulls. It was Mark Guard, engineer with CDFW, who took it upon himself to fill in all the nulls. It was wonderful. We had a lot of blank fields for those. And he did that statewide. And then we are now reviewing and correcting them as we move region by region. We started with sort of looking at kind of a consistency review, looking at whether the streams were all in the same, the records on the same stream were named the same, and also spelling errors and things like that. Then we matched it with hydrography layers and used topographic maps. And we've completed that for region 5 and 4, and we will continue to complete that for the other regions as we move north. So next step was the land ownership. Daring, a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service volunteer, did this consistency review. So she looked for spelling errors and land ownership, and as well as grouping things like U.S. Forest Service, that we had individuals forests, so group them all as one U.S. Forest Service. And then the next step we will take is to update, kind of compare it with land ownership layers that we have in the pad and update to match the most current information. In many cases, we'll probably fill in a lot of nulls. So the last step was to review and compare the reference documents. Why this crossed out is that we completed this partially in Region 5, and Sandy Jacobson with Caltrout actually completed this and reviewed about 175 records, and it took her 10 hours. So it was pretty time consuming, we discovered, and that's why we didn't continue it in Region 5, and we're not going to continue it going forward. I will say one thing about this is that it's very similar to what Sharon Powers was doing in Del Norte County. Another thing to note is that one of the reasons we didn't think we necessarily needed this step was because we're going to the experts. So we'll probably get the most current information. Okay. So the expert review, we are, like I mentioned, we're moving south to north. We completed actually Region 5. And we are focused on those non-Caltrans locations, as I've been mentioning. And And then we also, in addition, are going to focus within priority watersheds, those core and candidate watersheds identified in NOAA's recovery plan. Okay. So here are some of the expert review steps. Well, first, with help from the forum, we developed outreach materials. We created a template email, requesting review by experts. Also, in the packets that we're providing to the experts, we narrowed down the information that we're requiring. Really, the yellow highlight is what is most important, and we have a few other information like stream name, tributary to name, and other things that can be updated as needed. But we narrowed it down so you didn't have to see the entire pad, just what we thought was important. So we provide the Excel, then a watershed map, and some instructions. And we were first identifying ourselves, fish passage experts. And we've compiled, some of that list for both Region 5 and Region 4, and we've completed for Region 5. But what we're hoping is that the experts will, many of you on the call, or most of you on the call, will go ahead and self-identify if you haven't already. There was a link provided in the email that we sent out about this webinar. So if you could just identify like whether it's low, medium, or high, if you have low, medium, or high knowledge of a passage in a watershed, that will help us immensely. What we were finding was we were sending emails and a few people didn't have actually knowledge of the watersheds we thought they did. And then lastly, we contact the experts and ask them to review the records. Okay, so these are some lessons learned we actually discovered in our Region 5 review and process. So one thing is, in the plan itself, we didn't actually specify how we were going to identify priorities. So we found for Southern California, we used the Southern Steelhead Recovery Plan to identify the priorities, and that primarily was because we thought those, core or priorities would be where experts had the most knowledge, and also very important to update. So we are going to, our solution or our process is to go ahead and complete that and going forward. So we're going to use the recovery plans, those as we're finding, more in the Central Valley candidate sites too, candidate watersheds. We're going to include both priority or core and candidate locations and just provide the experts the records within those watersheds. And then the other thing I mentioned was identifying fish pass experts and their geographic range. I sort of mentioned it was sort of difficult for us in Region 5. So now we're asking experts to self-identify watersheds. And then thank you, Alicia, for the link. And then in the chat, if anyone needs to see that. And then lastly, so the expert response for Region 5 was pretty good overall. There were a few that were delayed. Primarily, I think it's because maybe we didn't have the right watershed in some cases. And then there were some who didn't respond, but in general, we had a pretty good response. I think the best thing is to have a list that is as large as possible of the experts in the area, and then, or the watersheds. And then also, we hadn't conducted a webinar for Region 5, and this is our first webinar. So thank you for attending. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate taking your time. I know this is a time when lots of people are on vacation and want to get out there, even though it's pretty hot where I am in the valley. But it's a time to kind of, be on vacation and be with your family. But anyway, so thank you. We really appreciate you being here. And so we thought that by conducting this webinar, we'd really get more input and more experts response, and just overall get more enthusiasm, get people more enthusiastic about this process. Thank you. And then I think, okay. Yeah, Neil will go talk about Region 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. So that brings us to Region 4 of the pad review. To start, we began with the desktop review, and there was quite a lot of in-house work we could do without needing to contact experts, just to check to make sure the locations we have in the pad are correct. And here we highlighted, we had to specify a few specific fields we really wanted to check, such as removing duplicates, checking the exact GPS location, and making sure that the point that the barrier was on had the correct stream name and that the downstream name was right. And while these seem like they might be pretty obvious things to have corrected, there are quite a few changes had to occur. Over 500 points in the pad had at least the stream name or the downstream name wrong and needed to be changed, whereas 2,600 didn't need any change. And using different maps such as topographical maps, aerial maps, overlaid on top of road files and river shape files, you could pick the exact point that you needed to. To find specific watersheds for targeted review, we used 2014 and 2015 steelhead and Chinook recovery plans to target specific watersheds that we wanted to fill out more of the pad with. To do this, we had to create and expand on the fish passage expert list. In Region 4, we have both coastal and inland watersheds to deal with, so we really needed a broad list of experts, and we really appreciate all the help you have given us of contacting other people that know this region and these watersheds. And then again, to reiterate, it's the self-identifying aspect that we want you to tell us what watersheds you know best. We may have an idea of what you know, but only you do know what's best. Here are labeled watershed maps. On the left are coastal and on the right is inland. Most of these are at the HUC 8, 10, or 12 levels. In some case, such as in some of the inland watersheds, we cut these watersheds in half in order to make them a little bit more manageable and just a little clearer for you when you start recording some of your pad data. So you should have received an email from us. If you have not, you can see the Google form that is posted in the chat. It has a lot of basic information you can submit, as well as the specific watersheds and your knowledge of expertise in those watersheds, low, medium, or high. If you haven't already filled it out, please do so and return that back to us, as we would really appreciate it. So after this meeting, you will be receiving an emailed packet from us. This will contain both an Excel spreadsheet and a watershed map. On the left is the Excel spreadsheet fields. In yellow are the most important fields, as these include such types such as barrier type and status, their location, the land owner or structure owner, as mentioned before, as well as if there's any treatment info or fishway status, if it's been remediated, or if there's anything exceptional about that barrier, we definitely want to know that too. Don't be afraid to write long notes to us. As much detail as you can provide will be really helpful. And then in the watershed map that you will receive, it'll have the barriers that are in the pad, as well as Caltrans owned sites. However, you will not be asked to review Caltrans sites. And here, just to reiterate that again, this is mainly for if you access the pad from one of the other sources besides the emailed packet we will give you. If you look on BIOS or on CalFish and you look on your own volition, you'll see a lot of entries in the pad where the structure owner is California Department of Transportation. That makes it a Caltrans site, and you do not need to worry about that. That can be in some specific rivers, such as these are all the entries in the pad for the Salinas River proper. You can see that it makes up quite a few, or in this case, a majority of the pad entries. So with that Excel spreadsheet, once you open it, we are asking you to update pad records and write in new barriers. Both of these are really important to us, that we review what's in the pad and that you're providing your own. New barriers won't have a pad ID, so it's easy to distinguish that. And if you wanted to color one red, for instance, updating pad records to make that a little more clear which ones you have reviewed, that would be helpful. Additionally, with that Excel spreadsheet, a lot of these fields have drop-down menus and allow us to keep the pad, the data in the pad standardized and a little bit more easy to query later on. Make sure you scroll to the right. As you can see, all the fields are on drop down. Yellow are highlighting most important, and the blue are your fields to tell us. It's really important that you mark if a field is reviewed or not, and any other information you can provide, especially photos or more notes, are great. That brings us to site type in the pad. So in Region 4, the majority of site types are diversions, followed by dams and road crossings. All this information is really important, and this slide is to emphasize that the other site types are just as important as the ones that have the most representation, such as diversions and dams. That sometimes it's the other site types, such as fish passage facilities or flood control channels, that are just as important as any other site types. Site types are just generally how what type of barrier it is. Is it a dam or diversions? Diversions would include both screened and unscreened in this specific category. Whereas other site types, such as road crossings, are those where a structure crosses a stream or creek but allows water to flow underneath. Non-structural is anything occurring naturally that restrains or obstructs passage. So this would be waterfalls or landslides, or even places in the river of high velocity that would cause a barrier to fish passage. And then additionally, we have grade control structures and a wide variety of other site types that you can include if you know about them. In terms of barrier statuses of the pad of Region 4, we have a lot of unscreened diversions, which makes a lot of sense, followed by total barriers. For you, you'll be mostly dealing with total barriers as well as partial and temporal barriers. As we'll get to later, if you know about diversions, we would love to know about them. And this whole effort is to kind of reduce the unassessed and unknown barrier statuses and other data in the pad, really reducing what is unknown about it and filling it out more. In terms of barrier status, when it's not a barrier, there is no interaction with the barrier on the river, whereas total barriers are a complete blockage to fish passage. And again, this can be man-made or natural. As you can see here, a natural waterfall can be a total barrier. Okay, partial barriers are barriers that are only a barrier to certain life stages or species, whereas temporal barriers are only barriers at certain flows. And here we define that as the average flow of a year, that all rivers, if they were to flood, they would be, fish could make its way over the barrier, but for the average flow of the year, we want to know if it would be a barrier at some parts of the year. And again, some barriers can be have multiple barrier statuses. Barrier can be partial and temporal. It's just more to consider while you review. And lastly, diversions can be screened or unscreened. In order for it to be screened, it must meet the CDFW and NOAA criteria. On the bottom right, you can see the California Habitat Restoration Manual, which has very clear guidelines for a screened diversion, and it must meet all these criteria. And a diversion could be properly screened in the past, but based on new amended criteria, no longer meet the standards. And lastly, the next steps. So after this meeting, if you have not done so already, please self-identify the watersheds of expertise. You can go to this Google form here, see our email or in the chat for that Google form. Once you finish that and sent it to us, you can then wait to receive an emailed watershed packet. Once you have that, please record your updates in Excel in a timely manner and send it back to us. The tentative deadline is by the end of September, and we would really appreciate some quick turnaround on these. And thank you very much. We couldn't have done it without our wide variety of supporters and people that have contributed to make the pad what it is today. And now I will send it back over to Anne. Thank you.
Yes, very much. Thank you. This is not a complete list of all the icons on this slide. Maybe it should be bigger and many more, because like I said, there's over 100 contributors, quite a bit of you even on the phone, from the city and from, other organizations, we don't have, unfortunately, an icon for you, but we did want to acknowledge and thank all of you, not only in this webinar, but really all the contributors have had. It's really what makes it a useful tool and comprehensive. Yeah, and we hope further collaboration and coordination with all of you. And with that, are there any questions or comments regarding this presentation? These are some examples. If you have any feedback on the PAD plan, we'd love to hear it, or any other watersheds to add. We're welcome to bring you back to the watershed map. Or any partners or experts we should include, you can let us know either today or after the webinar, or anything about related efforts that would be any recent assessments or things like that. Don't be shy.
Yeah, thanks, Anne and Neil. So I'll just jump in while people are maybe thinking about their questions and unmuting. So we just want to say thank you again. I don't think we can say it enough. And this is an opportunity. Feel free to ask any questions. Basically we're, as Anne and Neil have both said, we're hoping that you will be able and willing to help us out with this and provide some of your local knowledge to help us update these barriers in the PAD. And so you don't have to do all of Region 4 by any means, but maybe, that's the benefit of this. The link that we have in the chat is to, self-identify where you feel like you have the most expertise and knowledge, and you don't have to be currently working in those watersheds. We learned in our introductions here that, there's folks that have worked in the region in the past, or maybe they have a statewide focus, but they have some local expertise that they can share. That's fantastic. So, and you could be on the line right now just wanting to learn more about this overarching effort, because we are going to move into other regions as we continue marching north as we implement the PAD plan. So we're really happy to have you participating here in whatever capacity that you can. And we recognize that this hopefully is tangential to some of the work that you're doing already, but may not be exactly. So we'd love to hear what you are able to do to help support this. So I see Chrissy's got her hand up. Feel free to unmute yourself, Chrissy, it'd be great.
Hello, yeah, this is Chrissy. So my team, we have maybe some of the answers right now, but not all of the answers. And we're hoping this upcoming year to do some field assessments and provide some updates about barriers. So so Suzanne and some AmeriCorps people might be more focused on Monterey County, and then Don Baldwin on San Luis Obispo County, and working with of course partners in those areas. And so we're going to try to do some field work this year. Staff are also really busy, so we'll see how far we get, but I think just starting that process will be helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Christy, and thank you for talking to me many times about that effort. I'm really excited about it. I think it will really help make the PAD stronger and more comprehensive, and I really look forward to those updates and assessments. Thank you. And at this point, I will say that we're trying to get as much. I mean, we might not get 100% of the PAD, most likely we won't get it updated, but we're trying to get as much as we can. I mean, as Neil mentioned in one of the slides, that if you've reviewed a location, please mark it as reviewed. I mean, if you're not familiar with that location or not familiar with its current status, feel free to say no and mark someone down in the review comments if you know someone we should contact, because what we found and what we're discovering is that the reviewers that we've contacted, not all of them may know everything about every single location. I mean, some are on private land, and so that's really hard to know the current condition. But I think at the end of it, we will have many updates and even new records and new barriers. And then we'll know what we don't know. So we'll know the locations that, couldn't be reviewed, and those that people don't know updates, we either can go back and find other experts who might know something about that and partners, or if there's still no information available for that, we might consider assessments in the future, or at least kind of like a gap analysis similar to Caltrans did.
That's great. And looks like Steve's got a question, his hand's up. So go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so my question is that since that there is some drop-down boxes in the Excel file, do you guys have like a explanation of each category of how we should define it? Or is it gonna look to the experts who's going to review those to determine how to quantify temporal barrier or partial barriers and all things like that?
Yeah, we do have, I hope I'm going to answer your question, but we do have, I mentioned instructions. We have like a separate set instructions, but we do have a README tab in the Excel that's going to have the definitions of what a temporal barrier being a barrier at certain flows or life stages. If you, however, have fish crossing information or know like the percentage of flows, that information you could give me, that's fine. Or if you have an assessment report you just want to hand us, like a recent one or even older one that may not have gotten in the pad, please go ahead and do that, Steve, or anyone else for that matter. But yeah, there will be, the drop down are the fields basically how they are in the pad, but we do provide definitions.
Yeah, I remember in the past, Fishery Branch has staff coming out in the field to do the assessment with us. I think it was back in, it's like 10, 12 years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was really helpful just because that's, the assessment was done by one person with the regional experts to help out with the assessments. But I know that's going to be a lot more resource heavy on your guys' end.
Yeah.
But
so at this point, what we're thinking at this point is just to review the records that we know, and then as the experts might know, based on their knowledge, just to make sure that the pad is matching as much as possible with what the expert knowledge is. And then we're not really asking the experts to go in the field. But then if anything that you're not familiar, or the experts are not familiar with the current status of that location, then by all means make note of that. Say you haven't reviewed it and why, and just say don't know current status, and then we can think about ways to go ahead and assess. But I think you're right about having, you're talking, Steve, about having someone helping with the regions, or at least helping go out and either, whether it's training or help do the assessments. The forum might be able to help that. I think once we get through this process, we'll have more of an idea of where we need it. You might already have ideas, Steve, about where we need assessments. Feel free to provide that information to us too.
Okay. Yeah, as you can see that, in Region 4, there's over, 550, unscreened diversions that, we're gonna need help to put into different classification or category, how to improve those fish passage issue, just because that, seeing as an unscreened diversion, that one may have large, bigger impact than others.
Yes. Yes. I know that department has a priority list, but you're right. You have so many more that aren't in the priority list. And yeah, I completely understand.
So I see Tim put his camera on, so we'll go with him next, and then Asia will go to you.
Thanks, Ann. I wondered if you folks have reached out to CAL FIRE. Unfortunately, with all of the fire suppression, there's innumerable wet crossings and hardened crossings that we just don't even know about. Maybe up in their national forest, or very far up in the watersheds. I don't know if they keep track of their crossings. If they don't, it might be a good seed to plant in their head, just to get some additional barriers known. And then following up on that, kind of a bee in a bonnet, trying to figure out if there's new standards that CAL FIRE and CDFW are coming up with for remediating hardened crossings. We can't afford to build bridges everywhere. Are there new standards that CAL FIRE is willing to consider for remediating barriers that we bump into out there in the fire suppression world?
Very interesting, Tim. Thank you. Yes, right now we have absolutely zero, I believe, CAL FIRE contacts. No, we have never reached out to them. Do you have any contacts, Tim? That would be lovely. It would, or anyone on this call have any contacts? And yeah, like you said, you don't know if they keep track of it, but it would be very useful for us at least to make contact with them and see if they can provide anything to the pad. And you mentioned this new standards in remediating crossings. CAL FIRE has one. I haven't heard of Caltrans. Did you ask if CDFW and CAL FIRE has new standards on remediating crossings?
I have heard that from some contractors working for for CAL FIRE during suppression, where there are hardened crossings, and they've been told by CAL FIRE that no, we can only put a bridge here if we take that concrete out, because CDFW won't let us do anything else. And I'm skeptical of that, and I'm just wondering if there are some new communications between CDFW and CAL FIRE regarding those crossings.
Good question. I don't know. Does anyone on the call know? With those who are also with CDFW?
This is Brian. It sounds like there's less communication because they're just trying to avoid our 1600. And so it sounds like there's less. What I can tell you in my area is that the counties have been very aggressive cleaning culverts after fires due to their concern for their roads. So they've been doing extra maintenance, but I don't think they actually keep track of anything. But there is, as far as I know, there's no discussion with CAL FIRE.
Well, those are great points, though. That's exactly the kind of information we're thinking about, or we'd love to hear. No, we're not thinking about yet, but maybe we're now. Asia, did you have something you wanted to add or ask?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because I know this is for all of Region 4, so I was curious. I didn't see either the Kern or the King River listed in either of your watersheds. Are those possible to include?
Yeah, we can include those. I can't remember, were those not listed in the, maybe they're not in the NOAA, are they in the NOAA recovery plans? I think they are within Region 4, but yeah, we can include that. It's fine.
There's really no anadromous species, and there's no Chinook or steelhead on those two systems. But we believe there are passage issues for native fishes that are important.
Yeah, and I should mention that the pad has been primarily focused on anadromy, or past barriers to anadromy, but we do have lots of information on barriers to native fish. So if you have anything, we can certainly include that, and we might already have some records in the pad, and it could be updated. That would be lovely.
That would be awesome. Is it possible to include that on your Google Doc?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. Awesome. I think Alicia can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. I think that's a great, the forum has its focus on anadromous species, but obviously we'd love to see barriers from fixed across the board. So we're happy to, yeah. And that's a part of the pad. So perfect. Yep. We can do that for sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts that you wanted to ask about the pad, or this was great. New partners to consider, watersheds to add. Are there any other related efforts maybe underway that you think we should know about? One thing I think Anne alluded to it as well, there's so many benefits to what we're trying to do here and updating the records in the pad. As we mentioned, so many partners use the pad and it's an input to so many tools. The forum, we have our relative small pots of funding, and we can fund assessments. So when we put our RFP out, if there's, an opportunity that you see arises either here or elsewhere, that is an opportunity for us to help support that. So we're hoping that this will, get the juices flowing for a variety of activities and, maybe not even funding through us, but other partners. There's lots of potential opportunities here. So, yeah. I see a question in the chat from Valerie. Are you going to distinguish between lawful and unlawful obstructions, i.e. 5901, 5948? Anne, do you have any thoughts on that at this point?
I'm sorry, I don't know that. Could you give me a little is Valerie able to give me a little background?
I'm not sure if she can unmute herself, but
I know. She might be able to write. I was trying to look them up right now, or does anyone on the call know? Is that
It's Bill McKinnon here. I can explain to you. 5948 and 5941 both make stream obstructions without a permit, meaning to say a 1602 stream bed alteration permit, prima facie illegal. And as we go through and examine stream systems, we see these obstructions, and of course you have to look at them in terms of a location to other obstructions as to whether or not their removal would make any difference. And we're concerned about the fish populations, again, to see whether or not it makes any difference. But if you have an obstruction, which is either vestigial, it's been there since pioneer days, or it has been done by a person who is thoughtless, or perhaps it is an obstruction that is a result of some other process, like a culvert to put in a driveway, those things are capable of ready remedy. You can literally publish a list and the legal community can go through and remove them for you. But it is a process to determine whether or not a 1602 has been issued, and it is a process to determine relevance. And if this is going to be a passage assessment, then those are issues that are sort of critical to the problem of getting rid of the obstructions. If this is not a purely academic activity, there has to be a reason for doing it. And it seems to me the reason has to be to remove the obstruction. Otherwise, it's pointless. So, are they legal obstructions or illegal obstructions? Your opinion on that would be useful.
Yeah, as I'm reading the California Fish and Game Code 5901, it does, like you just mentioned, it's unlawful to construct or maintain any device that impedes passing fish up or downstream. So the information in the pad is we do have barrier status. So we do have information on whether it's a barrier to both up and downstream passage in the pad. And so that could be used to probably determine that it's, like you said, illegal, not conforming to CalFish and Game Code 5901. But we don't have necessarily a field tracking whether it's unlawful or lawful, but we're happy to talk about that going forward. But yes, I mean, the pad does explain if it's, I mean, if you just were to exclude like diversions and just look at those constructed on the stream, we have lots of barriers constructed in the stream that do not conform to CalFish and Game Code because they're either being maintained or constructed. And but I don't know, is the maintenance, I mean, like what if there was an old flashboard dam? Does it need if the dam is still there, but the flashboards aren't installed, would that still, would it violate this CalFish game code 5901? Or if they put the slats back in, the boards back in, then would it not adhere to this code?
I'm going to, as I guess I'm the attorney on the call, I'd be so bold as to answer the question. We had an obstruction in Placer County, which had been there since gold rush times. It had been replaced by FEMA without permission in what was deemed to be emergency situations in 1990. It was assessed by CDFW to be a critical barrier to reproduction of fall run Chinook. The obstruction owner, which was a large public water agency, raised the objection that it had been there for a long time and it was serving a useful purpose. Neither of those things was a useful defense, and that obstruction is now gone. If there is an obstruction anywhere in the state of California which has not been put in lawfully with a permit, it can be removed, no matter who owns it or for what purpose. And the reason I'm asking this in this particular venue is because if you folks put an extra field in your report and it says that the folks who are preparing the database certify that it is unpermitted and therefore unlawful, it makes my life, it makes water audit's life a lot easier. We can just sort the database, go to unlawful and start to work. So, you know, conversely, and you folks all have access to your 1602 applications and your 401 applications and all the rest of the paperwork that should be there if the obstruction is lawful. The reason Rich Maravich is on the line is because in addition to being able to simply go out and get a court order if necessary, and thus far it never has been necessary because when defeat is inevitable, people tend to find other ways of looking at the problem. But, you know, we also know that it is possible to do this cooperatively with the fundings that you folks all have available to do this. What I'm suggesting is that sometimes good intentions and persuasion doesn't work, and we're the hammer. And what we really need is for you folks to be very clear about the fact that this obstruction is not there as a process of law. It is there because somebody decided to do what they wanted to do, and that's unlawful.
I think this discussion probably should be broader through everyone and the folks on the call. Certainly those who review the 1600 permits, those on the call, we might not have a resolution at the end of the call, but we can certainly have a conversation. Oh, maybe Steve has his hand up.
Well, I just want to react to it, saying that the original intent of the pad was to, at least, you know, with my involvement, SIN has always been helping, you know, whatever fish passage issue identified in the past to improve. And I'm certainly not disagreeing that when the landowner or the obstruction owner is, you know, not cooperative, that other ways should be solved. But this has always been the first step of identifying passage issue that we are wanting to deal with or improve upon. And certainly the legal reviews or 1600 violation review can be a utility of these things, but that's going to require a lot more resources and involvement of other staff from the department to make that happen, which is I'm not seeing that's being done right now.
If I might just respond to that briefly, we're involved in Napa, where we've just using the pad and other tools, we've identified about 50 obstructions that are injurious to fish, cumulatively more than 100 miles of spawning area being blocked. And over the course of the last very few months, 3 months, 4 months, with the background awareness of the fact that there is litigation, the community has come together, and all of the regulatory agencies, including CDFW, had, I think, 6 or thereabout participants in the last meeting. And we are working on a process by which we can both have a big overview and can deal with a bunch of small things. And I think that it goes without saying that we can't do this without public support. And I'm not advocating in any way, shape, or form for conduct that would cause the public to disengage from this program. We are very conscious of that. But what I'm suggesting is this: if you look at your objective to have an absolutely beautiful, perfect pad plan, if that is your ultimate objective, with respect, you've missed the point. The point is to get rid of these obstructions, not to identify them and assess them, but to get them gone. And I'm just suggesting that if your folks with your capabilities and your obvious prestige can say this is unpermitted, then to some judge in a small community in a rural part of California, that assessment means a great deal. And I wish you'd make it, but I understand it's a big ask for this sort of group. I just appreciate you hearing the idea.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I think everybody would love to have all the barriers gone at some point. And we do hope that this is as good as we can make it, but we also recognize that it is never going to be perfect. So we are looking at and Ann and Neil and others, feel free to chime in. I think the PAD plan, this is our, it's our first step to do this in a while, but it's the baseline and the best available information that we have. And we also, I think you said this as well, we don't want to discourage anyone from providing information on barriers either. So for whatever reason, I think that the tool is, the PAD is available for anyone to use and to view. And so our goal at this point is to get the best information that we can and provide that, and then that can be extrapolated and utilized in other ways. So just the beginning with our very limited resources here. So thank you all for those questions. I want to open it up to make sure that, are there any other thoughts or questions that folks have about the PAD plan and the resources that Ann and Neil will be sending out to those that have identified themselves as available with interest and expertise in these various watersheds. So another shameful plug as you're thinking about this, to fill out the Google form, and I'll just say that the resource packets that they've put together are really, really helpful. But in addition to that, they're also both available to help walk through it with you if you have any questions. So hopefully it makes it as easy as possible. Ann and Neil, do you have anything else you'd like to add about the PAD plan or the email packet or any of that?
I just have one thing I think to add quickly. In terms of adding new fields to the PAD, I think we've been trying to reduce the number of fields or not add more to them. We've already added a lot. I think we're up to 31. So I don't think we want to add too many more fields to just complicate the PAD. Anne can add more information if she wants.
Yeah, you're talking about a larger PAD or what we provide them, Neil? They
Right.
don't have 30. Do we have 30 records? We don't have
The
30
larger pad.
records. Oh, in the pad, yeah, yeah. Well, I will say we have made changes along the way. We always have to weigh, I mean, yes, if you have any suggested edits to the pad, we could certainly consider those, and look at them and discuss them. But I think, yeah, we certainly don't want to make it not manageable. I'm the one entering the data, so you know, and we want to make sure that's not unmanageable to those users of the pad, right? Either too many fields to look at. So it's just a sort of a balance, as I think what Neil's kind of getting to. But yeah,
right.
For sure.
And we have gone through iterations of updating the pad and adding. We have added fields over the time.
Okay. Well, feel free, as we've mentioned, to reach out to both of us, or all three of us, if you have any questions. But Anne and Neil are definitely the technical experts when it comes to the pad. So we're going to pivot here a little bit. And if other questions about the pad come up, please, don't hold back, because we'd like to address those while we have you on the phone. So I'm going to switch over and we're going to open it up for an opportunity to talk a little bit more about, if there's any other issues related to fish passage in some way, shape, or form that you would like to discuss while we have this open. And this, just while you're thinking about it, a little background here. When we were implementing the pad plan in Region 5, we heard from some partners that were really helpful in providing feedback and reviewing records, that they also really wished that there was an opportunity to have these kinds of discussions and sort of an informal forum virtually. Maybe someday it could be in person, with regional partners also working on fish passage issues in that region. So some of the things that came up that they mentioned, but this is not, this list is not the limit, was thinking about new projects. Maybe there's an assessment underway or planned projects that are almost done, nearing completion. Maybe somebody's looking for partners on projects, technical assistance, other items. So while we had you here, we wanted to open this up a little bit broader than just the passage assessment database. If there are other fish passage related issues in Region 4 that you wanted to chime in on. So yeah, if you could just raise your hand, we'll call on you, and otherwise feel free to unmute if there's anything you'd like to add. And we may have covered it during the last discussion as well. So that's perfectly fine if that's the case. Brian, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to chime in on anything, or?
No, sorry.
That's okay.
I threw it in the chat. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. That sounds good. All right. Oh, Megan's got something. Okay, one option could be to identify a river or barrier of interest and then individually submit a PRA request regarding permit status, which would likely be responded to quickly if adequately limited in scope. And I know there's been a couple other things that have popped in throughout the last discussion that we haven't referenced. So Megan, if you want to elaborate, feel free. I'm just scrolling back up.
Sure, that was just related to some points that folks were making regarding the potential interest in assessing the legal status of some of the barriers, more pertinent to that earlier conversation. But recognizing that we all have our funding purposes and need to observe that, I just wanted to offer the option of submitting Public Records Act requests, since that can be an excellent tool in your toolbox for learning more about fish barriers, as well as a variety of other things that our agencies in California may have information on. So generally speaking, you get a response within 10 days. whether or not that information is available. And then typically you would receive the actual responsive documents either within that 10-day window if your request is adequately limited, or shortly thereafter if the records are voluminous. And so it really isn't that onerous as an individual to get information regarding a barrier or two. Obviously, if you're assessing thousands of barriers, it can be pretty hard to get that information, and you could experience delays due to the volume. So just offering a suggestion to those who are interested in learning the permit status of barriers on a particular river.
Great, that's really helpful, and yeah, definitely outside the scope of the pad right now, but the pad could be used to help inform that and make those requests. So that's perfect. Thank you for that.
Excuse me for jumping in, and somehow Valerie and I got logged in and I can't raise a hand. Forgive me for a brief commercial here. Water Audit California is in the business of doing what needs to be done. If the regulatory agencies are politely asked and they're not getting a response and they consider it significant, I put in the chat thing, our email address, drop us a note. This is not a commercial, but I will say that there are people who have described Water Audit California as being the hit squad for CDFW and the Water Board, because we will do things without political consideration and we aren't limited by budget.
Okay, I see JD is unmuted. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, just to throw an idea out there.
Okay.
I work mainly on the Stanislaus, Tuolumne, and Merced rivers below the rim dams. So passage per se is not really an issue there. Our passage issues are unscreened diversions. And I feel like in the Central Valley, we don't really have a good handle on what impacts diversions are actually having on our salmonids. So I would ask this group if they're aware of anybody doing any research or any published research on assessments of take associated with different sorts of diversions when they're operating, on a daily basis, when they're operating seasonally, the sizes of fish they might be pulling in based on different configurations. We're really trying to get a handle on whether our CDPIA funding is best spent on habitat, or whether we should be devoting resources to screening, just a ton of unscreened diversions on these watersheds. And so if anybody's got any ideas on that front, I'm happy to hear them or have an offline conversation with them.
Great, thanks.
This is Ann Elston. There might be someone who can answer this better, but I will say, I don't know if I can answer it per se, but you're right, there is just so many unscreened. And Neil came across a paper by UC Davis, maybe he can pull it up and put it in the chat, if possible, a recent paper that looked at unscreened diversions into different diversion types. That was maybe a cheaper option than screening a diversion, especially since we have thousands upon thousands. And it looked at entrapment, and it was interesting. I mean, they did say there are a few studies. I don't know if anyone has seen the study once he can provide the link, but basically there was a significant reduction in entrapment with a different kind of diversion being used. All unscreened, just looking at unscreened diversions, but it was interesting. I didn't know if there was, and it looked like U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it looked like your group funded it, actually. Okay, there's the one that Neil just, maybe you're aware of that. I don't know if that's any use.
I'll take a look. Thanks much.
Yeah, thank you, JD.
The title is Assessing Juvenile Chinook Salmon Behavior Entrapment, Risks Near Unscreened Water Diversions. Maybe someone else can answer that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to open it up and see if anyone else has anything to add that's working on diversions?
This is Brian. I can say last century I did work for Kramer and Associates, and it's a problem. I mean, it's the unscreened diversions and pumps suck up lots of fish, and it's not imaginary. It's real. I've counted tens of thousands of dead salmon, so it's a problem. It depends on the diversion and the timing, but yeah, it's if they're on when they're swimming by, it's a problem.
Yeah, and I have to agree with Brian that a lot of unscreened diversion, especially those who operate in the springtime, tend to be problematic to migrating juvenile salmon just because the timing of those pumps being used, and if they were unscreened or not screened properly to the NOAA guideline, that a lot of time it will cause a large mortality or becoming not necessarily just to being sucked into the pond, but also becoming an area where juvenile salmon will have poor swimming performance, and then are lost to predation and things like that.
Yeah, Steve and Brian, a lot of that stuff makes a lot of sense. The problem is that we haven't really quantified it. I'll read the paper that was provided, but really kind of CDPIA is using the science integration team. Oh, sorry for you coastal people. Central Valley Project Improvement Act. We have a fisheries program designed to mitigate for the construction of the Central Valley Project. And so we're really trying to get a decision support model in place to evaluate what our best ways of spending our funds, our fairly limited funds, are to try and double the natural production of anadromous fish in the Central Valley. And so when we don't really have a good handle on how to assess the losses associated with an unscreened diversion, it's really hard to compare that to what creating new habitat might get us or adding flow to a system might get us. And so really looking for quantitative opportunities to do something other than kind of say, well, if we take 1% of the flow, we're taking 1% of the fish at that diversion. It's a pretty simplistic assessment. And I know there are lots of factors that contribute the likelihood of entrainment. And so I'm just looking for anybody who might have done a real study with real numbers of fish that that was done actually in the field with a real operating entrainment or a diversion. I see Richard's hands up.
Yeah.
Yeah, just following up on the question of whether barriers are permitted structures or not. I was wondering if 1600 permits have a geographical index, if there's a coordinate associated with 1600 permits that we could do a proximity analysis with coordinates in the PAD database and maybe get more quickly to the question of whether a permit was issued in the vicinity of a barrier.
And I might look to you. Do you have any information on that?
I don't. I mean, I think it's CDFW, right, that issues the permits. I mean, that would be a question for CDFW if anyone on the call knows about that.
Mm-hmm.
We could always circle back later and try to find someone who've worked on 1600 permits.
Yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, but Water Audit just had a matter up in Placer County where NOAA and U.S. Fish and Wildlife and CDFW all weighed in on some pretty significant water diversions. I mean, not necessarily significant to some of them in the Central Valley. And they examined all of the options, and I don't have that in a single thing that I can at the moment present, but what we will do is we will post that on the Water Audit California website the next day or so. And if you drop by, we'll have something that will be evident to you that will direct you to the studies that were done by the different agencies. I'm an attorney, not a hydrologist or a fish biologist, but it seemed like they did a most admirable job at working their way through the alternatives.
Great. Well, folks can go and look at your website for that. But I didn't want to lose track of JD's question about the diversion. So just maybe one more shameful plug here for, JD put his email in the chat as well. So if you have any information on that, on diversions and quantifying the losses there. But I think that was a great discussion as well about the importance and something that is to be considered, not just within, these groups, but I know there are other partners and even fish habitat partnerships that are focused on the issues around diversions and fish screens and things like that. So I think that was a perfect example of what we were hoping to hear from. So thanks, JD and Brian.
I have a question for some of the folks. Are you seeing, and I think Steve mentioned this, it depends kind of when they are diverting water. Are you seeing it a big issue caused more by this drought that we're in?
Oh, you have to bring this
that?
up. Yeah, so right now I can tell you that drought definitely play into a factor. Like I'm using Merced River as an example. So my team has been monitoring using the drought emergency funding to allow us to provide more year-round monitoring in the lower Merced River. What we have found is that lower Merced River had reached 0 CFS in June and has become completely cut off, that they're dry by beginning of July. And then now people are driving on the riverbeds. We have tire tracks of the photos that we can show. To me, those are complete barrier, but those are seasonal barrier caused by, I want to say that drought, but it can also happen, in other low water years, just because that people are taking a lot more water in the rivers at the wrong time. So yeah, definitely timing. It's an issue, and water availability also play into a big factor too.
I'm sorry, but doesn't 5937 put an affirmative duty on a dam operator to bypass sufficient water downstream to keep fish in good condition? How can this be a tolerable situation?
I have that conversation with another NGO. We're having a discussion purely academic, and just to talk about the basically the utility of that particular FGC, and we never reach an agreement in our discussions. So I mean,
there's an article published in the UC Davis Law Journal, co-authored by Peter Moyle and Kerrigan Bork. Both of those are members of our advisory committee. We've sued government agencies of every stripe successfully for bypass of 5937. I don't know who you're talking about to, but you aren't talking to us. Please, folks, don't remain silent and watch this stuff happen. We're here now.
Yeah, and I can guarantee you that internally the CDFW, the manager is aware of the situation, and we are working to to look for solution to this. But like everything else, it's not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. So it takes time.
That's a really good way to sum it up. Thanks, Steve. And I just want to thank everyone for your time. We've already hit our limit, and I want to be respectful of that. Big thank you to all of you for even considering and participating with us today. Please let us know if you have any questions about the PAD plan, and stay tuned for more. And another just plug to please fill out the Google form if you haven't yet, and we'll update it accordingly based on our conversation earlier. So Ann and Neil, anything else you want to add real quick before we sign off? Oops.
Well, thank you so much for joining in and listening and providing great questions. And I would love to know more. I might follow up with some of you about diversions, what information you would like on diversions to review.
Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. And stay on the lookout for emails further from Ann and I. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye.